He asked for you on his birthday, Julian. I told Michael his father was far too busy conquering the world to remember one little boy. It appears your empire has no room for an 8-year-old. The words were not shouted. They were delivered with the calm precision of a scalpel, slicing through the conditioned silence of the penthouse boardroom. They came from Eleanor Vance, the woman whose silver hair was swept into a chignon as immaculate as a steel crown, his mentor, his corporate godmother, and now his executioner. Her eyes, behind Cartier frames, were like polished obsidian, cold, deep, and reflecting the very hollowness they had just carved inside him. The air in Julian Croft's lungs solidified. An empire. She called it an empire. He had built Croft Holdings from a dorm room idea into a multi-billion-dollar fintech titan, a skyscraper of glass and steel that speared the Manhattan sky. He had thought it was his legacy, but Eleanor, with a single sentence, had twisted it into his epitaph. She had taken his most private, searing grief, the loss of his son Michael in a bitter custody battle a year ago, and forged it into a public weapon, holding it aloft before the board of directors like a bloody trophy. He didn't hear the murmurs that followed. The faces of the men and women around the long mahogany table, people who had once hailed him as a king, blurred into meaningless streaks of color. The world narrowed to a tunnel. At the end of it was Eleanor's voice, echoing, mocking. No room for an 8-year-old. Julian stood. His chair slid back silently on the plush carpet. He said nothing. There was no rage, no protest, just a vast, black hole where his heart used to be. He turned his back on them, on his empire, and walked. Each step on the marble floors of the corridor was a hammer blow on the coffin of his pride. He didn't take the elevator to the garage. He walked straight out the main doors, into the fury of an October storm. The rain fell without mercy. It was a liquid curtain, hammering the concrete canyons of Wall Street, smearing the neon lights into bleeding watercolors on the black, slick asphalt. His suit was soaked in seconds, clinging to him like a cold second skin. But the chill outside was nothing compared to the eternal winter in his soul. Thunder cracked overhead, a primal roar that seemed to echo the silent scream trapped in his chest. He walked without purpose, a ghost in expensive tailoring among the scurrying umbrellas. Then in the very heart of the street that had made him, his legs gave out. Julian Croft, the CEO, the billionaire, the Wall Street prodigy, collapsed. He fell to his knees on the gritty pavement, tears mingling with the rain that streamed down his face. He was no longer an icon of success. He was just a father who had lost his son, a broken man weeping like a lost child in a storm of his own making. That's when he saw the feet, bare, smudged with grime, and small, standing a few paces away. He slowly lifted his red-rimmed, swollen eyes. A small figure stood there, drenched and shivering in the downpour. A black girl, maybe 10 years old, wearing an oversized, threadbare jacket. Her braided hair was plastered to her forehead, and in her cupped hands, she was sheltering something with the focus of a soldier guarding a last precious ration. She tilted her head, her large eyes clear, but carrying a weathered wisdom that didn't belong to a child. They were eyes that had seen too much, too soon. She didn't ask if he was okay. Such questions belonged to another world. You lose it all, mister. Her voice, a clear but steady sound against the drumming rain, cut through his misery. 'Cause you're taking it harder than anyone I've ever seen on this street. Julian just stared, unable to form words. Had he lost it all? No. He had billions, penthouses, and private jets. He had everything, and therefore, he had nothing. He had lost the only thing that mattered. The girl studied him for another moment, her sharp gaze assessing his shattered silence. Then, with a decisive movement, she looked down at the treasure in her hands. It was a chocolate muffin, slightly crushed and damp around the edges. It was probably her only meal of the day. Then, the impossible happened. With small fingers, trembling from the cold, she carefully broke the muffin in two. She didn't split it evenly. She kept the smaller piece for herself and held out the larger half, the one with more chocolate chips, toward the kneeling man. Here, she said, her voice devoid of hesitation. You look like you need it more. Julian's hand shook as he reached out to take it. The piece of muffin sat his palm, damp, sweet, and impossibly heavy. It was heavier than all the gold, all the stock certificates, all the assets he possessed. Here, in the heart of the storm, a man who had lost his soul was receiving a piece of one from a child who had nothing else to give. That single act of sacrifice pierced through every layer of his defenses. It wasn't pity. It was compassion in its purest form. For the first time in a year of hollow pain, Julian Croft felt a spark of warmth, fragile but unmistakable, a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, a light can exist. The penthouse was less a home than a museum, a silent expanse of marble, glass, and shadow occupying the top of the world. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, the storm-lashed city glittered below, a distant, beautiful wound. To Serenity, who entered, leaving small, wet footprints on the polished floor, it was another planet. Her wide eyes took in the cavernous space, the grand piano that stood like a sleeping beast, the art that hung on the walls like captive ghosts. This was a world of impossible wealth, and Julian saw it through her eyes, not as a triumph, but as a gilded cage, its vastness only amplifying his solitude. He gestured toward a hallway. "There's a bathroom through there," he said, his voice still raw. "Take a hot shower. There are clean towels." He didn't want to crowd her. Her survival instincts were a coiled spring, and he knew a single wrong move could make her bolt. While she was gone, he went to Michael's room. The space was a perfectly preserved memory, untouched since the day his son had left. The faint scent of a little boy still clung to the air. He found a soft, gray t-shirt with a faded print of the Millennium Falcon and a pair of sweatpants. He placed them outside the bathroom door, a silent offering, a fragile bridge between the son he had lost and the child he had just found. When Serenity emerged, her small frame swallowed by the oversized clothes, she looked like a child for the first time. Julian had prepared a simple meal: hot tomato soup and a grilled cheese sandwich, set on a massive kitchen island. She ate with a quiet, watchful intensity, her back straight, ready to flee. Julian knew he had to cross the divide. "My son, Michael," he began, his voice low. He loved that shirt. He used to hide behind the couch and jump out shouting, "Dad, I'm your Jedi Knight." A sad, fleeting smile touched his lips. He had shown her his own wound, not as a strategy, but as a truth. He saw her shoulders relax, just a fraction. She dipped her sandwich into the soup. "My mama," she said at last, her voice a small, clear sound in the vast silence. "She used to sing to me. Said her voice could chase away the closet monsters." She paused. "I wish it could chase away the real ones, too." A chill snaked down Julian's spine. "What happened to your mama, Serenity?" She set her spoon down, her gaze direct and unflinching. "She took her," she said, the words delivered not with childish fantasy, but with the cold finality of a witness. "Who took her?" Julian asked, his heart beginning to pound. "The fancy lady," Serenity replied. "The one who always wore a silver pin shaped like a phoenix. The one who looked at my mama like she was dirt on her shoe. The silver phoenix. Eleanor. The brooch was his gift to her, a symbol of their shared success. Now, it was a symbol of pure venom. She gave my mama chocolates," Serenity continued, her voice trembling with the memory. "In a gold box. Mama said they tasted funny. After that, she started forgetting things. Then she forgot the way home. One day, she looked at me and she asked who I was. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. The next day, men in suits came. They said they were taking her someplace better. I never saw her again." Julian felt the blood turn to ice in his veins. A memory, sharp and damning, erupted in his mind. 6 months ago, in the executive elevator. He had seen Eleanor's look of cold, reptilian hatred directed at Alara Washington. He had seen it, and he had done nothing. Guilt rose, hot and suffocating. It fused with the rage, now surging through him, forging a new, dangerous energy. His pain was no longer a formless void. It now had a face, a name, a silver phoenix pin. The broken man on the pavement was gone. In his place sat a hunter. The shift was instantaneous. He rose from the table, his movements precise and filled with a lethal focus. He strode to his desk, his hand steady as he picked up his phone. "Marcus," he said into the phone, his voice clipped and cold. "Cancel everything. My penthouse. 30 minutes. We have a kidnapping and possibly a corporate coup." He hung up. A second call. "Izzy, I need you now." The name is Eleanor Washington. "I want everything from our HR systems. Every cleaner has been terminated from the 42nd floor in the last 2 years." He paused, his gaze falling on Serenity. "And Izzy, do this completely off the grid." He ended the call. The penthouse was the same quiet room, but it was no longer a cage. It was a war room. He walked back to Serenity and knelt before her, bringing their eyes to the same level. "Serenity," he said, his voice imbued with an unbreakable purpose. "They took your mother. They took my son. I can't promise to bring Michael back tomorrow. But I promise you this, we are going to find the truth. And we're going to make them pay." The penthouse had transformed. The silent museum of wealth was now a humming command center, a pocket of intense, focused energy suspended high above the sleeping city. Izzy Flores moved through Croft Holdings' digital infrastructure like a phantom, her fingers a blur across the keyboard, the soft clicking the only sound in the room. Across from her, Marcus Thorne dissected corporate filings, his face a grim mask in the blue glow of his laptop. Julian stood between them, a sentinel fueled by black coffee and a cold, hardening rage, watching the shadows of a conspiracy take form. "Found a pattern." Izzy's voice cut through the silence, sharp as broken glass. On her screen, a list materialized. For other names. For women, all contracted cleaners assigned to the 42nd floor, all vanished within the last 18 months. Their official terminations were cloaked in the chillingly sterile language of HR. Acute anxiety disorder. Emotional instability. Gross violation of security protocol. "They're ghosts, Julian," Izzy stated, her voice devoid of emotion but laced with professional anger. "No forwarding addresses, no social media, no digital trail." This wasn't termination. This was a systematic purge of witnesses. At the same moment, Marcus let out a low curse. "She's been selling the soul of the company," he said, pointing to a complex diagram of offshore entities. "Eleanor has created a network of shell corporations in the Caymans. She's siphoning our proprietary trading algorithms and selling them to a competitor in Shanghai." The two discoveries clicked together, forming a terrifying picture. Eleanor wasn't just staging a coup. She was committing high treason against the empire they had built, and she was burying anyone who might have seen her do it. Yet, they still lacked the smoking gun. They had the motive and the methodology, but no direct evidence linking Eleanor to the disappearances. They were staring at the shape of a monster, but couldn't prove it had claws. It was then that Serenity, a small, silent observer on the sofa, spoke into the tense silence. "My mama knew she was a snake," she said, her voice clear and steady. Every head turned. "Mama said that when you live in a world of powerful people, your weapon is being invisible." Julian crossed the room and sat beside her, the weight of his despair momentarily lifting. "What do you mean, Sarah?" "They never noticed the cleaner," she explained. "They talked in front of her like she was a piece of furniture. They left papers on their desks. My mama saw everything, and she wrote it all down." The notebook. Julian breathed, a surge of adrenaline cutting through his exhaustion. What did she hide it? "Not just hidden," Serenity corrected, a spark of fierce intelligence in her eyes. "Mama said the most important secrets should be hidden in plain sight. She put it inside an old book at the New York Public Library on Fifth Avenue. But," she added, stopping the two powerful men before they could move, "it won't make sense to you. Mama wrote it in our code." For a moment, Julian's gaze lingered on her small, determined face. There was something in her eyes, the same fearless glint Michael used to have when he was solving Lego sets far too advanced for his age. He felt that same ache in his chest, the reminder of what it meant to protect someone who believed in you completely. This wasn't just about vengeance anymore. It was about proving to his son and to himself that he could be the man who safeguarded the people who mattered. The room fell silent. Julian stared at the child in awe. Alara Washington wasn't just a victim. She was a spy master, an intelligence agent hiding in plain sight. And this small, brave girl was her cryptographer. "She taught me the stars," Serenity explained softly, her voice filled with a daughter's love. "We'd lie on the roof of our building, and she'd name the constellations. In the notebook, for every fake company, she drew its star picture name. And the money, she used the lullabies she sang to me. Each song was a different number. They didn't wait for morning. Izzy, with a few silent keystrokes, created a momentary blind spot in the library's formidable security. Under the cloak of the receding storm, Julian and Serenity slipped into the cavernous, silent building. The grand hall echoed with their soft footsteps, a billionaire and a street child on a quest for truth. Serenity led him with an unerring confidence through the dark, towering stacks to a worn, leather-bound copy of Aesop's Fables. Back in the penthouse, under the bright glare of a desk lamp, the notebook's secrets bled onto the table. It was a map of Eleanor's criminal empire, and Serenity was their guide. "Here," she said, pointing to a drawing of connected stars. "Draco the Dragon. That's what Mama called the company in Switzerland." She wrote here. Serenity traced a line of neat script. Evie calls it her dragon's hoard. Laughs about it. And this, her finger moved to a set of letters. T-L-S, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. That was Mama's song for $20 million. Page by page, the code revealed a detailed indictment. Julian looked at Serenity, no longer seeing just a lost child, but a warrior wielding her mother's legacy. Alara's courage and Serenity's brilliance had given them the weapon they needed. He stood and walked to the window, the city lights below seeming to pulse with a new, predatory energy. "Izzy," he said, his voice firm and cold, "send everything to Marcus. Tell him to prepare the brief. Eleanor has called a board meeting for 10 a.m. She thinks she's going to finish me." He turned back, a humorless, determined smile on his lips. "She has no idea. She just arranged her own execution." The boardroom on the 42nd floor was a sanctuary of power, a glass-walled cage suspended high above Manhattan. The air was cool and still, the silence broken only by the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the climate control. Eleanor Vance entered at precisely 9:58 a.m. She wore a navy blue power suit that was like armor, her silver hair coiled in its perfect chignon. On her lapel, the silver phoenix pin glinted like a predatory eye. She moved with the unshakable confidence of a queen about to secure her throne, her leather briefcase containing the forged documents she believed would be the final nails in Julian's coffin. Julian was already there, seated at the head of the long, ebony table. He wasn't tense or angry. He was a portrait of unnatural calm, his deep-set eyes watching Eleanor as she moved through the room, bestowing calculated smiles and nods upon the board members. They were lambs, oblivious that they were not gathering for a corporate vote, but for a public execution. "Gentlemen," Eleanor began, her voice resonating with decades of cultivated authority, "I regret having to call this emergency meeting, but the state of Croft Holdings is precarious. Under Julian's leadership, we have seen a pattern of reckless, unfocused decisions that have endangered our financial stability." She went on, a masterful performance of concern and gravity. She presented her doctored evidence, citing twisted figures and misrepresented projections. She painted a picture of a CEO adrift, distracted by personal issues, a captainless ship sailing directly toward an iceberg. The board members shifted uncomfortably, exchanging uneasy glances. Julian remained perfectly still, his hands clasped on the table, allowing her web of lies to be fully spun. When she finished, a heavy silence fell. "For these reasons," Eleanor declared, her voice dripping with theatrical gravity, "I am calling for a vote of no confidence in Julian Croft as Chief Executive Officer." Julian lowered his eyes briefly, and in that fraction of a second, he saw Michael's face in his mind. The boy's unwavering gaze on the day of the custody ruling, the silent question in his eyes. Why didn't you fight harder, Dad? That question had haunted him every day since. Today, in this room, with this battle, he finally had an answer. He wasn't just fighting for Croft Holdings. He was fighting to show his son and himself that when it mattered, he stood his ground. No one was going to take another family away on his watch. He slowly raised his head, his gaze locking with hers. A slight, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "Thank you, Eleanor," he said, his voice a low, steely counterpoint that cut through the tension. "A very compelling presentation, but I believe we're missing a few key data points." He glanced at Izzy, seated discreetly in a corner with a tablet. At his signal, the massive screen behind Eleanor, which had been displaying her fraudulent charts, went dark and then flickered back to life. It was not a slide presentation. It was a live video feed. The image sharpened to reveal a stark, white room. Sitting up in a bed was a woman, frail but with a fire of defiance in her eyes. It was Alara Washington. Beside her, Marcus Thorne placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. The entire boardroom went silent. A single, sharp gasp was audible. Eleanor whipped around, her face instantly turning the color of chalk. Her mask of calm composure cracked. "This is Alara Washington," Julian continued, his voice now booming through the room like a judgment bell. "She is not suffering from a mental health crisis, as your falsified HR records state, Eleanor. She's a witness you had drugged with poisoned chocolates, abducted, and held illegally in an unregistered private clinic for the past 6 months." What is this?" Eleanor stammered, taking a step back. "This is a trick, a fabrication." "It's no trick," a voice said, clear and powerful, coming through the room's speaker system. It was Alara's voice. "You took 6 months of my life, Eleanor. You tried to take my daughter from me. But you forgot one thing. You can lock up my body, but you can't lock up the truth." As if on cue, Izzy projected pages from Alara's notebook onto the screen. The constellations, the coded lullabies, the meticulous, handwritten notes. The entire room could now see the detailed map of Eleanor's criminal empire. "You used my company as a front for an international money laundering scheme," Julian said, rising to his feet, his voice now the roar of a lion too long caged. "You sold our secrets, and you eliminated anyone who got in your way." The heavy oak doors of the boardroom burst open. It wasn't building security. It was a team of FBI agents in tactical gear, weapons drawn. They moved with cold, lethal efficiency. Eleanor spun around, her eyes darting, looking for an escape where there was none. Her glass tower had just become her prison. As 2 agents moved toward her, Julian delivered the final blow, looking directly into the terrified eyes of the woman who had been his mentor. "You taught me to build an empire, Eleanor. Thank you. Today, I'm using it to burn yours to the ground." "Julian, please," she begged, her arrogance finally shattering into raw desperation. But it was too late. The sharp click of handcuffs echoed in a dead silence. The silver phoenix pin fell from her lapel, landing unnoticed on the plush carpet. Eleanor Vance, the uncrowned queen of Wall Street, was escorted from the room she had once commanded. As she passed Julian, she hissed with venomous hatred, "You will regret this." Julian didn't even look at her. His eyes were fixed on the screen, where Alara was now weeping silently, tears of liberation. Justice hadn't just been served. It had been masterfully performed. The curtain had fallen, and from the ashes of betrayal, something new was ready to be built. That evening, the penthouse was no longer a cold museum of wealth. It had become a sanctuary. The city lights sparkling outside the windows were not symbols of a lonely empire, but the stars of a new world. The simple, warm aroma of chicken soup, a scent that hadn't graced this space in years, hung in the air. The reunion was not a grand spectacle. It was a quiet, sacred moment. When Serenity saw her mother, Alara, step into the room, frail but standing tall, her world narrowed to a single point. She didn't run. She just stood, her large eyes welling with tears, as if she couldn't trust what she was seeing. Eleanor knelt, her arms open. "I'm home, my little star," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Mama's home." That was all it took. Serenity launched herself into that embrace, burying her face in her mother's shoulder, and for the first time since Julian had met her, she cried. Not the silent, stoic tears of a survivor, but the heaving, cathartic sobs of a little girl who was finally allowed to be a child again. Eleanor held her daughter tightly, her thin fingers stroking her hair, a silent vow of protection in her touch. Julian stood at a respectful distance, leaning against the grand piano, a witness to a miracle. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man who had been given a profound gift, the understanding that true power wasn't in conquering markets, but in mending a single, broken world. Instead of opening a bottle of champagne, Julian walked to his desk. He sat and began to type an email to the entire staff of Croft Holdings. He didn't use the polished words of a PR department. He told the truth. He announced Eleanor's arrest, not hiding the extent of her betrayal. And he told the story of Eleanor Washington. He didn't call her a cleaner. He called her the silent guardian of our company's integrity. In that email, he announced a new initiative, one not for profit, but for purpose. He wrote, "Effective today, Croft Holdings is establishing the Eleanor Foundation. Funded initially by 20% of my personal assets, this foundation will provide pro bono legal support and witness protection to any employee at any level in any corporation who has the courage to expose wrongdoing." He wasn't just punishing evil. He was building a system to empower good. He was turning his company's scar into its shield. When he pressed send, he felt a lightness no billion-dollar deal had ever given him. The final scene took place an hour later. Julian was on the floor, sitting on the soft Persian rug with Eleanor and Serenity. They weren't doing anything grand. They were simply putting together a Lego set, Michael's Millennium Falcon, which had sat half-finished in his son's room for a year. As Serenity clicked a piece into place, Julian caught himself thinking, one day, Michael will see this. He'll know his father fought back. Serenity's giggle filled the room, a sound sweeter than any symphony. Eleanor, leaning against the sofa, watched them, her smile still tired but full of hope. For the first time, the penthouse felt like a home. Julian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Michael. His heart gave a hopeful leap. He answered the video call, and his son's bright, energetic face filled the screen. "Dad, Mom said you called. Is everything okay?" Julian looked at his son, and this time his smile was real, reaching his eyes. He angled the phone so Michael could see Serenity and Eleanor, who offered shy, happy waves. "Everything's more than okay, son," Julian said, his voice soft. "It's just, I'm home. I'm really home." He'd spent his life building an empire of glass and steel. He never realized that the most important pieces were small, colorful, and could only be put together with love and compassion. Eleanor tried to take my empire, he thought, looking at the new, improbable family before him. She had no idea she was giving me a kingdom. The greatest empires aren't built of money and steel, but of kindness and courage. Julian learned that true wealth is the family we build and the justice we fight for. If this story touched your heart, show your support by liking this video, sharing it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribing to Talk Story for more tales that matter. Thank you for watching.